There are some misconceptions out there regarding procrastination. Some people think that procrastinators are just lazy. That's really not the case. Well, there are various types of procrastinators, as we will see in the next lecture. And it is possible to have a lazy ass on top of your procrastination, which would be a real bummer. But in general, a procrastinator is far from lazy. Actually, procrastinators are often hard-working individuals who are really good at coming up with all kind of stuff to do, which they do, in order to avoid doing what they should be doing. But in any case, they are doing a lot of stuff. It's not as if they are just sitting there doing nothing. Well, sometimes they are, but mostly not. They're too busy doing other stuff. Another misconception is that they would be stupid. Actually, procrastinators are quite gifted and astute. In some cases, the task at hand is just way too boring for them, and they need that little extra to spice things up. It's way more exciting if you only have one night ahead of you and want to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy before the sun comes up. That's a challenge worth living for. To understand procrastination, we have to understand where it comes from, understand our behavior. You know, why we do the things we do the way we do them. Now, I'm not going to go too much in detail here, as I've covered this extensively in various other courses of mine. For now, know that I'm a strong advocate of uncovering the unconscious drivers behind our behavior. We like to see ourselves as rational beings, but we're not. We're most definitely not. Don't get me wrong, we're capable of rational thought, but that doesn't make us rational beings. No, we are social beings, emotional beings, contextual beings, even instinctive beings, long before we could consider ourselves rational beings. When a procrastinator procrastinates, he or she doesn't sit down and starts a rational thinking process about how he or she will procrastinate, waste time on other things before finding oneself with their back against the wall and having no other option than to work twice as hard to get things done? Of course not. But neither does it just kinda happen. That might be what it feels like, but underneath that feeling, there's an unconscious decision-making process going on which drives us to act a certain way in certain situations. So how does that unconscious decision-making process look like? I thought you'd never ask. Let me try to explain to you in the best way I can what's going on in our head, how we make decisions, and why we sometimes procrastinate. Welcome to the human mind. I'm going to use the iceberg analogy. You know, the part we can see and the invisible part underwater. Actually, this analogy was introduced by Carl Jung. Even though some of his findings are outdated, a lot of what he said is still valid today. And even though the iceberg analogy has been overused, it's a total cliché and frankly not even as accurate as I wished it would be. The thing is, it's the best I have, and it's one most people will understand, so indulge me. We were saying, yes, an iceberg. The iceberg stands for who we are, or more exactly for how we make decisions in life. The top of the iceberg, the part we all can see, is like that little voice in our head. That little voice is our conscious self, the one with self-awareness. Because of it, we firmly believe we are our own boss. We are the ones in charge, taking decisions alone, maturely, rationally. Yeah, right. Back to the iceberg. If the iceberg is floating, it's not because of the part above the water, but of what is beneath the surface. In exactly the same way, our decisions are not the result of our conscious self, of that little voice, but of what's beneath the surface, our unconscious drivers. These unconscious drivers will present a limited number of options to our conscious self, who will then take a decision. Now let me explain. We can identify three drivers. The first one is our genetic driver. Millions of years of evolution have embedded in our DNA a whole series of survival strategies which will diminish the risk of being eaten alive or becoming extinct as a species. Amidst the pyrotechnics of firing neurons and rushing hormones, this programming will lead us towards preferences that keep us safe from harm and towards reproduction. From primal instincts over physiological needs, it will push us to eat, sleep, stay safe and have sex, and not necessarily in that order. But not only that, here we also have our personalities and motivations, those things we are naturally inclined to love doing. The second driver, influencing our choices, builds on the first one. As a species, we're born incomplete. Our brain needs to continue its development and won't reach maturity until the age of approximately 24 years old. Now, everything we do stays recorded in our brain. Now, especially what happened before reaching maturity will have a strong impact. Even if we, our conscious self, don't remember a thing of our first years on this planet, our brain does. It's all registered there. Since the first moment we left the safety of our mother's womb, and actually already before that, our brain started to form itself and respond to the environment it was confronted with. And it hasn't stopped ever since. Our values and norms have developed this way, but also our self-confidence, inhibitions, limiting beliefs and attached coping mechanisms. And all that, even if it remains under the surface, tells us what to do, how to behave, what to say, in what circumstances, and so forth. It ends up creating a roadmap for how to react to the outside world, based on our prior experience. And the basic rule underpinning it all is as simple as it gets. We will seek to repeat whatever experience we've enjoyed, and we will seek to avoid any experience which created discomfort. Now, the third and last driver is intimately interwoven with the two others. It's the environment or context we're in. With context, you have to understand the physical, social, and physiological context. Colors, smells, and sounds will influence us, just as the company we're in or the amount of strain we're under. And in the case of a procrastinator, there's always a perfect excuse readily available in our immediate environment to postpone doing whatever we should be doing. So these three forces combine, mingle, and continuously assign value to things, people, and situations. Once our conscious self comes into play, it can merely choose out of the pre-assigned associative valuations, which he has no clue why they came to being in the first place. So the procrastinator, that thing he or she should be doing, is getting a way lower value than those other options the unconscious drivers came up with. And systematically, the procrastinator will go for those other, more attractive options. Sometimes the suggestions that bubble up from our unconsciousness are in competition with one another. Our primal instincts wanting to avoid a conversation at all cost, but our prior experience tells us that not facing issues usually doesn't end well. That's where that little voice in our head comes in. That's when our reason picks a fight with our instincts or emotions. That's when we test our willpower. That's when, sometimes, we just feel torn apart with the foresight of shame and guilt when we know that we really should be doing one thing, but we're doing something else instead. So one of those drivers below the surface, or a combination of them, is pushing us towards the choices we're making. And if that little voice in our head isn't paying attention, we will just go with it, time and time again.